Mage may be a physically weak class, but they wield a power far greater than muscle and steel. Trickery of the mind, mastery of the elements, the ability to bind lesser Daedra to your will, even twisting them into mystical weapons. The Mage is far from being an easy target. The sheer range of options the Mage has at his disposal allows him to deal with any situation and overcome any obstacle in his path. The Mage is primarily interested in expanding his knowledge of all things arcane and procuring magical artifacts for his collection. With the Synod on a rampage across the continent trying to secure every item of significant power, he finds himself with far more competition than you'd expect for lost, buried, and mostly forgotten relics. I wore a circlet with Fortify Magicka and Fortify Magicka Regen, robes with Fortify Health and Fortify Magicka Regen, gloves with Fortify Magicka and Fortify One-Handed, boots with Fire and Shock Resistance, a necklace with Fire and Frost Resistance, and finally, a ring with Frost and Shock Resistance. Alright, let's take a look at the perks that I've chosen for the Mage. So, for Alchemy, I did go all the way up to 100, but I didn't take any points in it. I didn't put any perks into it. You could very easily put points in there so that you can have potions that will boost each of the magic schools, particularly Destruction. That would be very useful. Illusion, I probably should have actually used it for Illusion so that I could affect higher level enemies, but I didn't end up doing that. Speaking of Illusion, I went really light into this one, just 2 out of 2 for Mastery and Dual Casting. Now you could certainly make an argument for going further up the tree, perhaps getting Kindred Mage and making your way up to Master of the Mind so that you can affect Undead, Daedra, and Automations, but in this particular case, I didn't do that. For Conjuration, I took, of course, 2 out of 2 for Mastery, as well as Dual Casting. I went up both the Atronach and Undead trees to a point, at least. So for, on the Atronach side, I went to Plane Meld, so that I could summon or raise undead further away. Atromancy, which allows me to my summoned and raised minions to last 3 times longer during the day and 5 times longer at night. Elemental Potency to make my Atronachs more powerful. Daedra's Dew, which just allowed me to get to March of Oblivion so that I could summon or reanimate more than 1 creature at a time. In fact, quite a few more than 1 at a time. For the undead side, I took Ravenous Dead to increase the level cap of those that I could raise. And I took Preservation so that reanimated undead last longer. And finally, Edge of Oblivion so that again I could raise an additional enemy, or raise an additional undead or summon another Atronach, and that they would last longer. For destruction, I went really heavy. 2 out of 2 for mastery, as well as dual casting. I took Runecaster so that I could summon or create runes further away and place more of them. I also took Force of Nature to increase the damage of my frost spells, and I did decide to go completely, full on frost for this particular playthrough. Took Robe the Magi to increase destruction spells since I'm not wearing any armor, and Elemental Specialization, and of course I put that into into Frost. Speaking of Frost, I went up to 2 out of 2 for Merciless Cold, Frostfall, reducing the attack damage of targets when they are frozen, Crystallize, causing enemies to not be able to regenerate stamina, Shatter, so that those who are frost resistant, magic's frost spells will explode in an area of effect on them, Hypothermia, causing living targets below 1/3 health to be paralyzed from the frost. Exhaust, which causes them to lose stamina 50% faster with frost spells, which was always a complaint of mine for frost spells. You just didn't do enough damage to stamina, I felt. And finally, Winter's Majesty, reducing frost resistance of enemies within 25 feet. And it applies on top of Shatter, which is quite nice. On to Restoration. I took 2 out of 2 for Mastery, and picked up Edgewalker, so that my Restoration spells became more powerful the lower my health was. I took Spirit Tutors, although I never did actually run into any of them. That would have been really interesting, because if you find the 2 Spirit Tutors, each of them gives you a permanent blessing that makes Restoration 1% stronger per 20 points of Magicka. So that would have been really, really a big bonus to Restoration spells, considering how much Magicka my character had. I did take Wheel of Life, so that sometimes it's just healing me automatically and I don't even need to use health spells. And Enduring Ideal, so that Wheel of Life is more powerful and each new cycle repeats faster and faster. For Alteration, I took 2 out of 2 for Mastery. I then took Dual Casting. I took 3 out of 3 for Mage Armor, since I wasn't wearing any regular armor. I went up to Alter Self Resistances and chose Shock and Fire to reduce the damage that I could take from that. I took Geomancer, although I never really used it in my playthrough that much. And Throne of Nirn, so that when in combat and out of doors with a spell equipped, you stand still for 5 seconds, you raise a pillar of earth carrying you out of attack range. I mean, that's just completely crazy. And finally, Enchanting. So 2 out of 2 for Mastery. I took Gem Dust, Regalia. Gem Dust is actually really interesting. So you use flawless gems of different types to increase the power of enchantments at a certain enchanting station. Regalia, increasing the enchantment strength on robes, circlets, and hoods, which of course was really useful for me with my robe, and I picked up a circlet as well to use for that. Twin enchantments, so I could place 2 enchantments on the same item. And finally, Arcane Nexus, so that I could upgrade 1 Arcane Enchanter to an arcane nexus.